Hi, my name is Bill Bliss, and I'm I'm on the Microsoft Teams platform team. I'm also one of the founding members of the Teams group and the engineering group at Microsoft. And today I'm here to talk about raising visibility and trust in apps on Teams. So let's dive in and figure out what we mean. This is a diagram that I created a while ago, and we use a lot. We call it the platform flywheel. And what it basically means is that you've got end users who are using apps, developers who have to build them, and you've got enterprise decision makers that enable users to use them, right? And all of those have to be kind of moving in concert in a smooth system, or everything kind of grinds to a halt, right? You can't have apps without users. Developers aren't going to write apps unless there are users to use them, et cetera, et cetera. But what we want to focus on here is the element of trust and the enterprise decision makers that enable apps. Okay, so what we found when we had this app store in Teams for a while is that a lot of large enterprises turn all of the apps off, which makes sense. They have to go through a review process and so forth. And then we said, well, what does it take for you to turn them on? And they described the process they go through, the data they have to gather, they have to get information from the vendor, et cetera. It's a very time-consuming process. But it's all about the trust, because they want to make sure they can trust the apps that they're using in their organizations. So specifically, we actually quantified some of this. So the developers, there's usually an outreach to the partner, to the developer. There's go through a security review and a privacy review. And all told, that can take something like 8 to 12 weeks before IT will approve something for use for end users. And if there's multiple regions to be considered, that adds to the list. And sometimes, if it requires GDPR review, then that can take even longer, because it requires specialists who've got a lot of other things to do besides just the review for a particular app. And so all of this gets magnified by the number of apps that people want to use or that users request to use, and the number of enterprises that developers have to deal with, right? So it's a very inefficient system. So what we said was, what if we could actually what would we could help developers and enterprises build trust with one another? And so the goal was, what could we do to expedite the adoption through increased transparency and trust between the Teams app developers and the enterprises? And we announced a little bit of this at Build, but today, or this week, we announced the very first Microsoft 365 app certification program, a pilot for Teams apps, which you'll see shortly. And the goal here, in Microsoft Build, in our May conference, we did this for Teams apps, and we had a system for publisher attestation. And what that means is developers would submit a lot of stuff on their information to us on their security and privacy practices, and also their data handling practices, because those are some of the questions that that people ask about when they approve the apps. And by the way, we actually talked to tons of customers and our own internal IT department to figure out, well, what questions do you ask your vendors when you want to enable an app? So all of these things is what we asked for in the publisher attestation phase. But in certification, we're actually adding trust, because we actually verify what is the information that is submitted, as well as a number of other things. So with publisher attestation, we ask people to say things like, to give us a bunch of information, but the key thing is, which I'll talk about shortly, but we ask them, we put this all in a single location, which I'll show you, in a consistent format across about 90 different vectors of security and compliance, which I'll show you what that looks like. And also this week, in addition to Teams certification, we are extending the publisher attestation program beyond Teams. So we reached out to a number of different partners who we have a lot of close contact with, and they submitted information for their Office add-ins, for Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Outlook, as well as some of the web APIs that are in AppSource and Office 365 apps. So they gave us tons and tons of information. We now have, I think it's up to close to 150 questions that we ask. And then we took all this information and worked with our partner team in the Microsoft Cloud App Security system. And I don't know if you know much about the Microsoft Cloud App Security System. We call it MCAS because that's kind of a mouthful. The MCAS is now, they have a booth over there in the security world, in the security area. And they are now in the Magic Quadrant in Gartner's analysis of Cloud Application Security Broker. That's the category that they're in. So this has been a really great cross-Microsoft effort. It's all about publisher attestation for Office 365. Now with certification, we take that a step further. So we've been working with a couple partners, you'll see the names in a second, and we asked them for things like, okay, what do you do for application security? Do you regularly perform penetration testing? What do you do for disaster recovery and backups and things like that? So we asked them about those things. With pen tests, we actually asked them for the report itself, and we'll also be doing pen tests if they don't have that for future ones. We asked things about operational security. How do they handle malware attacks or prevent against malware? How do they do patch management, incident response, vulnerability scans, all that kind of stuff that really affects the operational security of the app that people are thinking of using in their enterprise. Data handling, security, and privacy is also what we look at. We look for least privilege design, meaning does the application require just enough and no more permissions that it really requires to function? And that means asking for all the permissions that they request, and asking what they do with them. Why do you need that permission? What do you do with it? Do you store the data? Things like that. Data retention and disposal. What do you do with the organization's data, and what kind of controls do they have over it? Data access and approval. Who has access to the data in your company? Because it's the organization's data. Who has access to that data inside the company? And then of course GDPR, which is of great interest to actually not just particularly in the European Union, but also across the world. And then lastly, the compliance check claim. So a lot of companies are SOC 2 compliant, or they may be compliant with PCI DSS or ISO 27001. But are they really? And when did you get your attestation? And can we actually see the report? Now those reports are usually confidential, maybe shared with customers, but we verify that they exist. And so that's what we do for app certification. And this week we announced the pilot result of this, and you'll see the names of them as well. There they are. Inside Teams, this is the admin console in Teams. We've integrated this into the admin console, so you can actually see the 3 apps that are, actually this should say certified. We took the screenshot before it was certified, but anyway, it should say, so Adobe Sign and, actually Adobe Sign is certified, and Approved Simple and Asana are attested. I'll show the logos of the 3 apps that in a sec. But anyway, one of the things we're doing is increasingly integrating this end-to-end across the entire admin surface, as well as app source and so forth, which you'll see. This is the page that you go to when you go, that I'll show you later, and maybe we'll have a chance to actually look at it live. If you go to app certification, aka.ms app certification, this is where it takes you. Actually, it goes to this overview page here. And what you see here is what you from Microsoft Teams, and you can see Adobe Sign is certified, and there's 2 others that are lower in alphabetical order. But you can actually see what do we know about those apps? Is it attested? That's the check mark. Is it certified or not? There's 3 of those now. Data handling information, cloud security information, and Cloud Security Alliance, which is another company or organization that we've been partnering with. And this just says what the app capabilities are inside Teams. As I mentioned, this is what that we've extended this across all of Office. And so this is what you see when you go down to say apps for Microsoft Word. There's Adobe Sign, Lucidchart, Office to SharePoint, Write for Office documents, and Office at Work has about 6 of them. They're all kind of related. They all share a lot of security and compliance information, but you can actually go there and at a glance see what that looks like. okay? So these are the first 3 certified apps for the Microsoft 365 App Certification Program: Adobe Sign, Dynamic Signal, and Wrike. We basically kind of handheld them through the process, and we kind of were perfecting it as we go, but we were extremely happy that they spent the time and effort to do this, and we really hope it'll increase the odds that they can be adopted without concern by enterprises. But there's also a bunch of publisher-attested apps. These are the logos. This is actually a subset, I think, of them. There's about 50-something, I think, right now. So these are all apps that have submitted information to us that we've published in our central clearinghouse of this type of information. As I mentioned, we've integrated this with AppSource. So if you go to Dynamic Signal, or to see a search for a Dynamic Signal in AppSource today, you'll actually see the Microsoft 365 certification link, which will take you to the information page for them. So we've integrated this end-to-end all the way from the store, submission process, and so forth. And we're also working on, this will only be of interest to developers, we are working on an integration with Partner Center so that application developers can actually submit all this information as part of their app. It's kind of similar to the age ratings for Xbox games. And so we're excited to announce that that we'll have that for developers soon. I'll be even happier because I'm the one who actually takes all this information and puts it in a database and generates all this stuff. So I will really like the fact that I won't have to do that anymore. This is the information, aka.ms app certification, and we have aka.ms, the app certification dev info. The capitalization doesn't matter, that just makes it look a little bit easier, it's a little bit easier to read. But this will actually be information for what to do as a developer, starting with attestation and for people that also want to do the certification as well. We have a few more minutes, so let me actually go over and demo what this looks like. Oops, I think I have to stop the slideshow. Okay, so when you go to aka.ms/app certification, this is what you go to. You'll see an overview and kind of what it is, what's it for, and so forth. For app creators, for developers, this is the dev info. It tells you what you have to do and so forth. But actually, let's look at what this looks like. So this is the apps for Microsoft Teams that I was showing you. And you scroll down and you'll see Dynamic Signal, and there we go, there's Wrike in the W's. Let's look at Wrike. Okay, so what you go here and you'll see that this page is organized into 4 sections: general, data handling, security and compliance, and the CSA star, because they've also submitted information to the Cloud Security Alliance. So you get a separate little badge here that says it's been certified. Oops, which links back to this. And so here's some base information, including things like the privacy policy and so forth. But also, this is one of the things that we found out when we talked to enterprise developers. Let's say I want to do the licensing. Who do I contact with licensing? Is it an email? Is it a phone number? Is it a web form? Oftentimes, that's not really disclosed. Where do you get information on licensing if I want to use this app? What's the licensing telephone number and so forth? So these are all things that have to be gathered manually. Our customers told us this is what they asked for. We said, okay, well, we'll ask our developers so you don't have to go get that yourself. But let's go into the meat of it. So this thing talks about, actually they don't use graph. Let me find one that uses graph. Let's see, how about, I think AtBot does. This is an attested app. Yeah, so here we ask for what are all the graph permissions that they use for, what do you use it for, and do you store any data in your own databases? If the app has a bot, then it has the ability to access the roster of the channel it's running in or the username of the person who's using it. Not every bot does this. In fact, most of them don't. But we said, well, do you or not? And so it says, turns out, yes, when they do. Why do you do it? To create mentions in bot-generated app mentions, so you can actually, it can actually have an app mention in what they generate. And do they store it? No. We ask information about the telemetry. How do they store and secure organizational data? And what control do companies have over that data as stored by them? And are humans involved in any of this? And last but not least, I mentioned the Microsoft Cloud App Security. We've actually taken all that information and replicated the UI of Microsoft Cloud App Security, which is actually a premium product, but we actually take this data and we're showing it in this thing. So this one shows they don't have a lot of compliance with this stuff, but they do have good stuff on data ownership and GDPR. So you can browse all that stuff. You can also open it up in a new tab. So that's the type of information we have. All of this information, minus the certification bit, is available for all the Office apps as well. So obviously there's more of them for Teams. Like there's a bunch of them for Outlook. Here's Adobe Sign. You can see what they use for Graph. It's actually down below. And let's see, and the whole bit. So there we go. This is what we've been hard at work for since build, to basically landing the attestation for just Teams apps, spreading it out to all of Office 365, and also adding certification. And this is just the beginning of app certification. We hope to extend this to other Microsoft 365 apps, add-ins, and so forth in the near future. We've got a few minutes for questions. Let me go back to this so you can actually take this down. And there we go. Yes, sir.
Maybe not really the point, but are you guys building anything that will allow security professionals to keep track of what you've either reviewed or allowed into the environment? I have InfoSec folks that I usually have to throw this stuff over the fence to, and they've talked about should we create a form, a spreadsheet, put it in a SharePoint list. They want something that shows them what they've reviewed and when, because they want to go back and do periodic reviews. And so
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this will meet all of their criteria or not.
So the question was, what do we do for, if I phrase this right, what do we do for, to integrate this with, or what could we do to integrate this with security, what was the word you used?
So I have InfoSec folks.
Okay, oh yes.
They basically want a catalog of what they reviewed and when.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so how do you make this available to your InfoSec team who wants to review see what was reviewed and when? We've actually talked about that. Right now, this is not in a form that's like easily packaged up and sent to somebody, but a lot of people have asked that, and so we do want to do that. It'd be interesting to think about, what would they like to see ideally. There's two things. There's like this. We are asking information like, when were you last certified, and what was your date, and what level of certification? We do ask that. It's not being surfaced completely here yet. We will be adding that. And there's no reason we couldn't, make that available. But to get it over into a package that somebody would want, I think that's an interesting idea. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, is the question? Yeah, I think the question was, what does it mean? What does it take to be certified? Yeah, there's not a hard requirement that you have to be SOC 2 certified or anything in particular. There's a minimum set of things like architecture review, penetration testing. If you do say you're certified, we verify that you actually are. We kind of expect that most of the ones who are looking for certification will have that type of certification, just because it's the type of thing, they kind of self-select into, it matters to them, obviously, and so they want to make sure that that gets known. But there's not a hard requirement that it's like, any particular level of certification, or at least, or compliance standard, at least not yet. Anything else? Okay, well, we're at time, a little bit over. Thank you so much for attending. I hope that you find this information valuable, and if you have any questions at all, I will be over at the Teams platform booth occasionally. You can also probably find some way to contact me over email or whatever. But I really hope that this is valuable to enterprises and developers. Thanks.